You fell in love with Sebastian, didn't you, last summer?
I tried to give him what you had always given him, the tender understanding and the love you gave
My
him.
son and I had a rare and wonderful love and trust between us. A sort of contract, a covenant between us.
Oh, I know.
He broke it. He broke
about
that
the
covenant between us when he broke away from me and took her, not me, to travel with him while he created his poem. Even when I was with him, even with me, he would sometimes be frightened, but I would know when and what of. I'd reach across the table to him and touch his hands. Say not a word, just look. And touch his hands with my hand. Then in the morning, the summer poem would be continued until it was finished.
I couldn't help him.
Naturally not. He was mine. I knew how to help him. I could. You didn't. You couldn't.
I tried.
I would say you will.
Oh, right. I failed him. I knew that the day we flew down to Cabeza de Lobo, and where he'd given off writing his poem.
Because he had broken. Oh.
Yes, something had broken. That string of pearls old mothers...
Old?
Hold their sons by...
Yes, hold them from death.
No, life. Hold them from life.
What do you know? You were the stranger, the outsider, the destroyer. We were life.
You fed on life. Both of you. Taking. People were objects for your pleasure. That's what you taught him and he taught you. Oh, you were superior to mere mortals.
So we were. We needed no one but one another.
Sebastian only needed you while you were still useful.
Useful?
I mean young. Able to attract.
She's babbling again, babbling and lying.
He left her home because she had lost her...
Because you stole him.
Lost her attraction.
What would attraction have to do with a son and a mother?
I'll tell you.
Is there no way to stop these lies?
Yes. Have my brain cut.
Doctor, this was a mistake.
The mistake was my going with Sebastian. When he left her home, she had a stroke.
Not a stroke.
A hysterical stroke. Sebastian left her home like a toy he'd tired of. And he took me with him like a new toy.
Hello and welcome to Book vs. Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of ColoniaBook.com and this is my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Brooklyn Bitchick.
Hi, everyone.
Well, suddenly, Margot, we find ourselves at the peak of summer. And we have a very, very fun summary book and movie to discuss today. And when we say book, we mean play. Because we try to do a brand new episode every single week, and that means sometimes we have to consider shorter literary sources. It could be a magazine article or a play, a short story, a novella, even a song. And that also means that we're constantly looking for new ideas. So if you're new, maybe you love Tennessee Williams. This is not our first time covering Tennessee Williams. We have some suggestions for future adaptations that you think we should cover. If you would like to meet other listeners of this podcast or interact with us, there's a few places where you can do that on the internet.
Yes, we do have a basic Facebook page. Be sure to like it, but we're much more interactive in our private Facebook group. So type in Book Vs. Movie Podcast Group and ask to join. We just ask that the story in and of itself is something easy to get our hands on and that the movie is streaming on a major app. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, and at those places you spell out book versus a movie. And then we have an old-timey email, book versus movie podcast, spelled it all out, at gmail.com. Let us know what your ideas are. Also, if you would like some stickers, just send us your address to that email and we will drop some stickers in the mail for you.
And if you really enjoy the show and would like to keep supplying us with books and movies, you can also support us on Patreon.
Yes, Patreon. We have a couple of very affordable options. We use the money for the books and the movies just to get the cost of the show together. We started the show 10 years ago. So we're putting about 8 years worth of shows and then all that on our Patreon wall. So recently we have up there Logan's Run, Legally Blonde, The War of the Worlds, The Fast and the Furious, and Fantastic Mr. Fox. That's just some of them, but we have over 170 on there, and we appreciate all of you that support us there. It really helps us out. Other ways you can support us, you can leave us a review wherever you have your podcast. Be sure to leave stars or a review, or just tell a friend about the show or retweet it or whatever. We really appreciate all the effort and all of you just tuning in every week. It really means a lot to us.
Now, as I said a moment ago, we have discussed Tennessee Williams before at length, but he is a very, very important figure in American literature and American theater. And I will find, I think I shared it when we talked about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. which I think is right before this play. There's a wonderful Mike Wallace interview with Tennessee Williams right after what was this called? Garden
District.
Garden District. I always want to call it Garden Party, but I know that's
Same,
not
like
right.
the song.
Garden District. Yeah, went to the Garden Party. Which I guess was, excuse me, I'm getting over some kind of mystery illness. Garden District was sort of like not as much of a hit as they thought it was going to be on Broadway, and so Mike Wallace is interviewing Tennessee Williams about it. It's very, very interesting.
Almost invariably, it seems to me, almost invariably, in your plays, the good is devoured by the evil. Or I wouldn't say that. In fact, I think I've yet to write a play in which some virtuous quality in the human being did not prevail at the end of the play. Even in Blanche, the stick-on named Desire, you see her walking off with gallantry and courage on the arm of the doctor leading her to the sanitarium. In Garden District, we end upon a gesture of compassion, which the doctor, who is then bribed enormously to perform a lobotomy on the girl, places his hands tenderly upon her head and recognizes the truth of her story, the poetic truth of it, not the literal truth of it. But you yourself say we end in a gesture of goodness. But it seems to me that most of the fabric, but not just to me, it seems that way to the critics too. I think that virtually every important critic has said this about your plays. For instance, Richard Watts, whom I know you admire, has described your characteristic mood as, quote, steeped in passion, hatred, frustration, bitterness, and violence. I don't have to contest that at all, Mike. It's quite true. And what I am after is, if I can find it out, if you want to tell me, do you really feel that way about the world? I'm having a big argument on this subject with my analyst, Mike. Right, I tell him that I don't feel that way.
But let's just kind of hit the broad strokes about this extremely important fellow.
Right. So his name was Thomas Lanier Williams. He was born March 26, 1911. He was born in Mississippi. His father was from Tennessee, and that's the nickname. He took on that as a pen name after he started writing for a few years during college. He has won the Pulitzer Prize. He is one of the most famous playwrights ever, up there with Shakespeare and O'Neill and Miller. He's one of the best of the 20th century for sure. His first big smash hit was The Glass Menagerie, which we'll talk about one day. I think like every kid in high school definitely has that on their syllabus. We've talked about these before. Streetcar Named Desire, Cat in a Hot Tin Roof. There's also The Night of the Iguana. There's from a family where his mother was what they would call overbearing. He grew up in a house where his father wasn't home very much or was a traveling salesman, and then they moved to Missouri. His dad went from being a traveling salesman to just being home all the time, and they moved to Missouri, and his dad was an alcoholic and was really tough to deal with. So he got most of his attention from his mother. He also had two siblings, a brother named Dakin and a sister named Rose. Rose was the one who had a lot of mental illness issues. Rose was someone he was extremely close to. She had a lobotomy done in 1943 to deal with her. And this also happened with Rose Kennedy. She's one of the Kennedy kids. This was just decided as a way to treat people with severe mental illness. I think it's also a way women who don't behave a certain way need to be away. Or sister was displaying, she might have been schizophrenic is what her diagnosis was. I'm saying all this because he mines this material quite often about mothers, about siblings, about parents, about the South.
Mental illness.
Mental illness. God, ecclesiastical, like, is there a God? And he was also homosexual. He was queer. This was something that he was open about at a time when not everybody was. I was just looking at a Harvey Fierstein interview, and it was with Barbara Walters, and he was talking about Torch Song Trilogy. This is 1981 or 82, but she's talking to Harvey Fierstein, and she's like, you're the first openly gay playwright, and people, and he even was like, no, I'm not. There's been many, and we've always been here, and you could talk to us. I can't tell you enough, like, how much it was demonized at one point in our culture. So this is a play that we're talking about today. Suddenly Last Summer, as Margot said, it's a one-act play, and it was from a group of plays called Garden District. And he had these big successes, and then it's very hard to write plays. It's very hard to write anyway. But he had some successes. He also had some failures. Now that he's been gone for a long time, people have gone back to his material and they've attempted things again, and they've said, oh, this is actually a classic, The Rose Tattoo, which was something that was considered, at the time, like, oh, this is a failure. He had a lot of like third acts, is my point. He was
Indeed. He really
did.
Talented.
Extremely talented and very charming. There are so many interviews you could find of him. He's usually seems a little drunk. He's very, loquacious.
He had many years of struggle with alcohol. Yeah.
And sleeping pills, and he's not the first or last person to have issues, but he talked about, he liked to see the human condition. He talked about frailty. He talked about vulnerability. Tremendously interesting person. So we have this tale here. It's the late 1950s. Elizabeth Taylor is in her 20s. She had done very well with the previous work, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. So she was this hot property, and they had done very well. His plays have done very well. They also turned them into a lot of movies because they're big, over-the-top characters. And there's a lot of like sexual tension in there. And there's just a lot of stuff going on that you can kind of chew on, which is great, which is fun, which is what you want from a story. He was a great storyteller. And so today we have this story that we're talking about, and it takes place in 1936, place in New Orleans. It's Southern, it's Gothic. It's about a matriarch who mourns the loss of her favorite son, her favorite child. She has a daughter that has she has a niece with a mental health issue. So they're cousins.
And this is another theme that comes up over and over again in, I really love the way that he shows how Americans in particular are driven to do what they're driven to do for pursuit of class and money. And so you often have in Williams's work, you have within the same family, like members of the same family who think they're better than other members of the family because of how they married or their looks or how much money they have. Money in particular, there's always a lot of like grabbing and sniping and backbiting and throwing people under a bus because they want money. Yep. And this is a really nice, like little, it's got all the things. It's got all the Williams elements in it. It's got, and we should say trigger warning before we go on about today's story. Like there's a lot of very difficult themes in this particular work. Got murder, we've got homophobia, we've got things about mental illness, we've got cannibalism. Yes, cannibalism. And
I think it's our first.
I think it might be. But this is a great story. So we open in the home, and it's a very obviously she's very well to do. Her home, like the way the home is described, reminds me a lot of the guy, the real home of the guy from Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Like,
yes.
His house was like that. I've been to his house. It was like, that's exactly what it was like. Like if there had been an elevator that descended down like that. All of that, because it's a one-act play, all of the action takes place in this space of her house, kind of sitting room and also kind of veranda garden area, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have different locations. And this doctor has come to meet with this very wealthy woman, Mrs. Venable, mm-hmm. and she arrives she enters talking, and she arrives in an elevator going on and on about her waxing poetic about her dead son. Straight from the start, right out of the gate, the audience knows, like, this lady is, I'm sorry, she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. She does not have a grip. Called him about this niece that she wants taken care of.
So he works at a mental health facility in New Orleans. They don't make a lot of money. She has this niece named Cathy, and Cathy is staying at the nicest mental health home that they have. This is also like mid-century. We're talking about psychiatry. We've talked about this many times before, but mid-century America especially, there was this idea of like psychiatry, looking at your subconscious and diving in that way, analysis, things like that. So she's in this mental health hospital. She was with Sebastian. Sebastian was the son of Violet. And she adored Sebastian. And Sebastian they were just wealthy. I mean, and I have family like this in the South. Like some people just have this money, or I don't know how they keep going, but they take these very extravagant trips every year. And Sebastian will travel with his mother. And she talks about like they have a love like nobody else in the world has. Their companionship is like next to none. Everybody wants to be around them.
Yeah, so normal, very normal.
She explains that every year they would go to Europe and they would travel, and then at the end of it he would write a poem and give it to her as like, I don't know, to pay for his service, I don't know. But then she explains that the year before, this is 1936 or 37 that we're talking about, the summer before, she had a mild stroke, basically. But she said, I had a little, vein, little pop in my head. It was, it was a little inconvenient, so I couldn't travel. So Cathy, her niece, travels with Sebastian, and Sebastian and Cathy were just like super tight. They were great friends. And then he dies when he's on this trip with her. So she doesn't come home with him, but she saw what happened to him, and she said he was murdered, and that and in a horrible, horrible way. And it was so horrible that when she thinks about it, she goes mad. And once again, Tennessee Williams had a sister who had deep mental health issues, and he himself, and of course he worried it would happen to him because his sister didn't display really these symptoms until her teens. And then it was like a quick decline. So he always wondered, wow, is that going to happen to me? So anyway, Cathy and Sebastian are like frickin' frack. They're best of friends. She comes home without him. He's dead. She's in this institution for a year. She's telling people what happened to him. And Violet does not want Cathy's story to get out about what her version of what happened to him. So she says to this doctor, I heard about this thing called a lobotomy. If you just open up her head, or I guess they go behind the eyeball is how they do it. I know. I watched Frances for some reason a couple of weeks ago, and they had that scene where Jessica Lange is screaming. Anyway, it's not funny, but anyway, so there was this procedure that this can help people who have mental health issues and are a danger to themselves and other people. What you do is you do this operation on their brain. You take this little bit out, and it'll make them docile and no, they're not productive in the way like they can't get a job and pay taxes and things like that, but you could put them in a place where they could live out their diet and they're safe. They're not harming themselves. They can't harm anyone else. And the hope is that they come from a decent family, or the state takes care of them. There's a whole lot of people who, that's to take care of them. And Vi is like, look, I'm super wealthy. I can handle this. I could put her in the best place ever, but this is what I want. And he's like, well, I could use the money for this institution because we're nonprofit and we're broke. But this sounds like a really extreme way to get about this money. I definitely need to talk to her first. Vi is really trying to charm him, disposition, her way with words.
Her culture, yeah.
Yes. She's, peculiar. And she's like she's got all these Southern eccentrics. That's what it is. Like the Southern eccentric to the extreme. He says, well, I need to talk to her first. I can't just agree to do this. So he meets her, and it's like, and Cathy's mother and her son want Cathy to get this done because the thing is that when Sebastian died, his money was put in a trust, and Violet is in charge of that trust. And for some reason, they can't get that money. And Violet is, I guess, in a state of like, she's worried Cathy's going to say things. Cathy's mother and Cathy's brother. She's saying to them, she gets this operation, you can get this money. They are now encouraging Cathy to do this. And they're saying to Cathy, like, aren't you not feeling that great? Aren't you, like, scared?
It's so terrible.
It's awful. Like, her family is telling her, you should get this done. You should really, and they're saying, because we're not going to get jobs. We're not going to work. You need to do this because this is how we're going to survive. Or we're on the streets. I mean, it's this really tough situation. And the doctor is Sugar, but it's the Polish word for sugar. That's his name. But anyway, so Dr. John is his first name. He meets her, and then he's like, she doesn't seem that nuts to me. She seems like she's going...
She seems traumatized.
But she's not. So he encourages her to come over to the house. So it's Cathy and Violet, and I think her mom and her brother, and then there's also a nun that's like a nurse for Cathy. And then there's somebody that works at the house that's like Violet's assistant. And then Cathy starts to talk about what happened with her and Sebastian. And it turns out Sebastian was gay, and that she's saying that Sebastian hung around Cathy and his mother because they were attractive women that attracted gay men. And so they would attract young men, and then he would go in for the kill. So he would seduce them or
pay them
to right. And these are very poor people that he's manipulating here for his needs, going after very young men because the town is onto him and his scheme. Like, he has Cathy like wear a white bathing suit, so when she goes in the water, she comes out, it's see-through. Like, there's certain things, and Cathy's not stupid. She sees like what's happening. One day they're having lunch. They stop going to the beach, and it's a paid beach. So you have to have money to go to the beach, like at Greenwich, Connecticut. They stop going to that beach. They're having lunch, and then outside on the fences are a bunch of these young boys, and it's going around town like, oh, he's here and he's having lunch with his friend.
And Sebastian recognizes some of the boys in the crowd,
right?
So he knows, like, oh, uh-oh.
They started talking to one another, and they figured out what this guy is up to and what he was doing. And they grab pots and pans, and they're making a lot of noise. Like, they're trying to scare him out from where he is. And what does Sebastian do is he just kind of throws some dollars his way and then tries to run away. And they're in Spain, and she's following, and he gets caught up by the boys. And then, trigger warning, and spoiler alert, they basically rip him apart. Like, they mutilate him. And that's how he dies. And it's out of revenge. And this is the big secret that Violet doesn't want to get out, that he was gay, and also...
mainly that he was gay. That's the main, like, not that he was murdered or how he was murdered, but that he was murdered because of his homosexual dalliances. That is the secret that's so horrible that she's willing to bore into her niece's brain to stop it coming out. So she spills the beans in front of everybody. What's different, again, it's much shorter than the movie because it is a one-act play. Hearing her story, her brother turns to their mom, and says, I'm going to just get a job. It's not worth it. Sorry, Mom. I don't know what we're doing. We need to get out of here.
Yeah, this is not healthy.
This is not worth it. Not like this. And Violet, it really loses her complete grip. She just starts screaming for the doctor to operate on Katharine. And that's kind of how it ends. We know that the doctor is not going to do that because there's nothing wrong with her.
No, and that's what he says. Like, he's saying, like, yeah, she's telling the truth. She's not making this up. Like, and it's a very real reason why she's having this traumatic response to everything. Yeah.
We should at least, he says, the last line of the play is something like, we should at least consider the possibility that what she's saying is the truth.
Right. That's the play. And then they had some other plays, but they all sort of take place in the same time, in the same era. It's 1957. They're going to make this into a movie. It does okay. I think it's off Broadway even, but I think
it does fine.
Yeah, it does fine. It's just there's not like huge stars in the play or anything. But when they're going to make this movie, Mankiewicz is the director. They have Elizabeth Taylor as the star, and she's like 25 at this point. Beautiful, like good.
Straight out of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
Yep.
This might be my favorite Elizabeth Taylor performance of all time. And I'm a huge Elizabeth Taylor fan. Right after this, she makes Cleopatra with Mankiewicz. But this is such an amazing performance.
There's so much happening here. So let's play the trailer and then let's talk about this movie.
Sebastian only needed you while you were still useful.
Useful.
I mean young, able to attract.
She's babbling again, babbling and lying.
He left her home because
you stole him.
Lost her attractiveness.
What does attractiveness have to do with the son and the mother?
You see, Doctor, we were both decoys.
This generation's greatest author and poet, writer of A Streetcar Named Desire and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, unashamedly writes of a woman's strong wants and a man's strange needs. Six great stars combine their talents to recreate Suddenly Last Summer, Tennessee Williams' magnificent drama.
Something horrible happened to that girl last summer. Some dreadful, traumatic experience of some kind. What?
It was a one-piece bathing suit made of something white. The water made it transparent. I told him I didn't want to swim in it, but he just grabbed me by the hand and dragged me into the water all the way, and I came out looking nude.
Why did he do that? Do you know why he did that?
Yes, you know why I was doing it. I told you.
Our director is Joseph Mankiewicz. Our screenplay is by Gore Vidal and Tennessee Williams. And you've been going down a Gore Vidal rabbit hole?
I have. If you've never watched it, there is a very, very notorious interview on the Dick Cavett show. It's Gore Vidal, Norman Mailer, who is being an absolute butthole, and Janet Flanner, who is an amazing, groundbreaking journalist who, during like the kind of Hemingway Between the Wars era, just an amazing woman. Norman Mailer is completely ignores her, and he's so horrible. And he's got this like bone to pick with Gore Vidal said something nasty about something Norman Mailer wrote like one time, and Mailer can't get over it. And then Mailer turns on Dick Cavett, and it's a very, very, it's straight out of RuPaul's Drag Race Untucked. It's like, it's very catty. At one point, he turns to Dick Cavett and he says, "Just read me the next question off your little card," something like that. Just really gross, right? And Dick Cavett says, "Well, why don't you," what does he say? Something like, "Why don't you fold it and put it where the moon don't shine?" It's well worth watching is what I'm saying. But yeah, he's another like super famous writer, very openly homosexual as well. So for when we're looking at this film, we've got Tennessee Williams, we've got Gore Vidal, and then we also have Montgomery Clift. We'll get to in a minute.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Dr. Kukrovitz.
Yes, sir. Take a seat, please.
Thank you. Mrs. Venable?
I'm Miss Foxhill, Miss Venable's secretary.
Oh.
And you are Dr. Kukrowitz.
Yes,
Your appointment was for?
4:30.
You are 23 seconds early. Sit down, please.
Thank you.
Sebastian always said, Mother, when you descend, it's like the goddess from the machine.
She's on her way down. Mrs. Venable's on her
And you're
way
just
down.
like an angel coming to earth as I float into view. Sebastian, my son Sebastian, was very interested in the Byzantine. Are you interested in the Byzantine, Dr.
Kukrovitz. No, I don't know very much about the Byzantine.
Well, it seems that the Emperor of Byzantium, when he received people in audience, had a throne, which during the conversation would rise mysteriously in the air to the consternation of the visitors. But as we are living in a democracy, I reverse the procedure. I don't rise, I come down. How do you do, Doc? Oh, I'm sorry, your name?
Kukrovitz.
Kukrovitz.
It's a Polish word meaning sugar.
Am I only wearing one earring? Have I forgotten my lip rouge?
Excuse me. I guess I had been told you were a widow.
I am. I'm in mourning. White was my son's favorite color. Perhaps, Dr. Sugar, you expected an old widow.
Probably.
With a garnet brooch and a cane and a huge air trumpet. Well, I have all that to look forward to. Life is a thief. Sebastian always said, life steals everything. I want to show you his garden.
On a movie about keeping somebody's homosexuality a secret at all costs. Who else do we have that we want to talk about on this production?
Well, we have Katharine Hepburn as Violet, and we have Mercedes McCambridge. She plays Elizabeth Taylor's mother.
Come on.
Come on. I mean,
stop the show. Ladies and gentlemen, I love that woman so much. Another one. I could just watch her do. She's so wonderful in this performance. She's just, you just want to smack her.
She's awful.
She's very much like Sister Woman in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof.
Yes.
She's like greedy and pretends to be nice because she wants money.
That's her daughter. That
it's her
she's
daughter.
sending. Yes, to get this lobotomy.
In a place called Cabeza de Lobo.
Anyway, what you said gave her a real turn. Then when the doctors all decided you were really crazy, why, she figured you ought to stay at St. Mary's.
Or even right here. This seems such a nice place, too, with that nice, capable doctor.
Go on.
But written permission was needed to keep you here.
So that was the point of the private supper.
Kathy, you've got to understand. This $100,000 is the most important thing to ever happen to us.
It means George will have all sorts of advantages now. Things we couldn't give him since 1929 killed your father and our nest egg.
Nothing. You didn't sign those papers. You didn't commit me to Lion's View.
Not yet. But Kathy, the way Aunt Vi put it, there was no choice at all. Mama's got to sign.
Besides, honey, it's not like it was for always. In fact, they say that in no time after the little operation, you'll be able to...
What little operation?
Oh, Kathy. Oh, Kathy.
There's only one little operation they perform here. It's on the brain. It's called a lobotomy. You may have heard of it or read about it. I have. It's that nice young doctor's specialty in cases of hopeless lunacy. He bores holes into the skull and operates on the brain.
Oh, honey, please don't talk about it. Please.
You can't. You can't.
Sister, stop carrying on like it's the end of the world.
Stop,
What's all the fuss? They say it don't hurt at all. I'm worse than having your tonsils out or something. And then afterwards, you're all right again.
She's over the top. It's a really amazing cast. I think they filmed it in England and then they on a stage in England, and then they also went to Spain for the outdoor scenes. Katharine Hepburn is Arvi. Was nominated for an Academy Award for Elizabeth Taylor and for Katharine Hepburn, but also for the art direction. So
it's so beautifully designed.
We didn't even mention if there's a lot in this the symbolism. It's a theater production, and Tennessee Williams is one of those. Definitely, that's about the symbolism and about what are the main themes going on here. One of the first things we meet when we meet Katharine Hepburn, who comes gloriously down in her wheelchair in the elevator, just like shows up like Dr. Evil or something, just like rocking it. But she has a Venus flytrap. So Sebastian is like I don't know what is into plants. He's into
exotic tropical plants.
Right.
And they live in New Orleans. And
very
it's
humid
and sticky. I didn't really appreciate, as much as I've loved this movie for so many years, I don't know that I'd ever read it before. And I didn't really appreciate until I read it and then watched the movie again, how much humor is in that script. It's very funny.
Yeah.
So she's trying to impress the doctor with this garden that her precious son Sebastian has put together. All of these exotic plants that can't be seen anywhere else in the world, and it's time to feed the Venus. It's like out of the Addams Family. It's time to feed the Venus flytraps. And I love her assistant Foxhill.
Yes.
And she calls for her assistant and says, I forget what she refers to the flies basically that she has to. It will only eat these particular flies, these fruit flies, that I swear are buzzing around my kitchen right now. Like,
Same.
They're not that exotic. Calm down.
It's just
Violet.
hot out. Yeah.
But Foxhill says, yes, the arrived parcel post from Pensacola.
And she's psyched to do it. She's psyched. So they have this plant. I was just thinking we should cover Little Shop of Horrors because they have the movie and anyway. But they have this Venus flytrap. There's a lot in here about voraciousness, of people having a hunger, people having an appetite. People have an appetite for sex. They have it for money. They have it for status. They have it for food. I mean, it's just this like exotic environment where you just can't understand what's happening here. We should also say this is super, super important. Montgomery Clift, which we haven't talked about before. We talked about Andrew McCarthy a few weeks ago, who's a big fan.
I can't believe we never talked about Montgomery. How have we not? We've just not gotten around to him yet.
I don't know. And I was on he's buried here in Prospect Park. They have a Quaker cemetery.
I didn't know that.
That's where he's buried.
Oh.
His mother was a Quaker. Very interesting actor. I was going down to Montgomery Clift.
He's wonderful. I love him.
I love him too. He was, first of all, just exceptionally handsome. He was a very beautiful actor. He was very serious about acting, and he was very serious about himself. And he was raised that way by his overbearing mother. There's a lot of, what they say, it's an old expression, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. But he and Elizabeth Taylor in the 50s were like best friends. He was gay as well, but it wasn't out at the time. And Elizabeth Taylor had a lot of gay friends. She was known to be an ally. Elizabeth Taylor was having a dinner party at her house, and Monty liked to drink, left her party, and it was in a terrible car accident, like down the driveway, and it totally mangled up his face. She ran out, she held him in her arms, and he said that he was choking on his teeth. She pulled the teeth out and held him, and she could feel his head getting bigger and bigger because of this injury. She goes with him to the hospital. I mean, Elizabeth Taylor just had a hell of a life, y'all.
She really did. She really saw some stuff.
Her story is also just completely
we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, that was
it's
56.
Horrifying.
1956. 57, 58 is like when they're making this movie. So he has to deal with, and we'll talk about Judgment at Nuremberg. Definitely, that'll be one we'll do one day. Like, he's in a lot of
that's such a great performance. I love that.
So good. So he had to deal with getting the physical reconstruction of himself because all of his great acting, he was known as so beautiful. So he has to get that taken care of. In addition to, he already had an alcohol problem. He then develops an addiction to pain pills because he's in pain all the time from all these tragedies. He also had some sort of stomach, like IBS kind of problem. So he could only eat like steak and he could only drink milk. Like he had a really limited diet. Yeah, it's very tragic, his life too. Anyway, so he was having a hard time finding work because he was known as this it's like, imagine Brad Pitt all of a sudden didn't have his looks. It's kind of like that. So Elizabeth Taylor definitely wanted to work with Katharine Hepburn, but she's like, it has to be Montgomery Clift. And they were not into it. They had to really talk him because they were like, no one wants to see him. His face has been mangled so much, but she insisted. So that's
Which, if you've ever seen this movie, like he's still gorgeous.
Oh, absolutely. And it doesn't matter if he's handsome or not. Like, it
doesn't affect his acting at all.
Right. His character doesn't need to be.
No.
But it's Hollywood.
Yeah. It's so annoying that they made such a big deal about it.
But he was also known to be kind of a pain in the ass. Like, he had his ideas about things, and it's funny, he was in a movie which I'd love to talk about. I don't know if Red River is based on any book or not, but it's with John Wayne and him. And it's so fun to see, like, their different ideas of what men are and how they behave. Montgomery Clift was just kind of effeminate. He was very gentle, and he was very thoughtful with his performances. He started on the stage. He was very serious about acting, getting into character and all that. But he had this issue. He was addicted to pain pills because he's in a lot of pain. And then this is a theater turned into a movie. It's a lot of talking, and it's Tennessee Williams. It's a lot of words, and you got to get them right, or the jokes aren't going to land, or it's not going to make sense. And he had a very difficult time doing scenes more than a few minutes, And so Joseph Mankiewicz apparently was very hard on Montgomery Clift and gave him a very hard time. And the story is that Katharine Hepburn was so disgusted with how Mankiewicz treated Clift that when she had her last scene, she went up to the director and said, can I go home now? Are we done finally? And he said, yes. And she spat in his face and walked out because she was disgusted by how he was treated. I think Montgomery Clift is really interesting in this movie. He's working with two women who are amazing movie stars.
They're just like two tornadoes.
Right.
And he has to be there between the two of them.
You fell in love with Sebastian, didn't you, last summer?
I tried to give him what you had always given him, the tender understanding and the love you gave
My
him.
son and I had a rare and wonderful love and trust between us. A sort of contract, a covenant between us.
Oh, I know.
He broke
I know
it. He broke
about
that
the
covenant
covenant
between us when he broke away from me and took her, not me, to travel with him while he created his poem. Even when I was with him, even with me, he would sometimes be frightened, but I would know when and what of. I'd reach across the table to him and touch his hands. Say not a word, just look. And touch his hands with my hand. Then in the morning, the summer poem would be continued until it was finished.
I couldn't help him.
Naturally not. He was mine. I knew how to help him. I could. You didn't. You couldn't.
I tried.
I would say you will.
Oh, right. I failed him. I knew that the day we flew down to Cabeza de Lobo, where he'd given off writing his poem.
Because he had broken. Oh.
Yes, something had broken. That string of pearls old mothers...
Old?
Hold their sons by...
Yes, hold them from death.
No, life. Hold them from life.
What do you know? You were the stranger, the outsider, the destroyer. We were life.
You fed on life. Both of you. Taking. People were objects for your pleasure. That's what you taught him and he taught you. Oh, you were superior to mere mortals.
So we were. We needed no one but one another.
Sebastian only needed you while you were still useful.
Useful?
I mean young. Able to attract.
She's babbling again, babbling and lying.
He left her home because she had lost her...
Because you stole him.
Lost her attraction.
What would attraction have to do with a son and a mother?
I'll tell you.
Is there no way to stop these lies?
Yes. Have my brain cut.
Doctor, this was a mistake.
The mistake was my going with Sebastian. When he left her home, she had a stroke.
Not a stroke.
A hysterical stroke. Sebastian left her home like a toy he'd tired of, and he took me with him like a new toy.
It's amazing.
And grounded.
And grounded.
And keep it reality, because he's our surrogate.
Exactly. And he's got to be Violet is waving this, I think it's like $1 million.
A lot of money.
In front of a great deal of money. To do this important work. He does genuinely want to help people. But he also, because he genuinely wants to help people, he's also not going to compromise his principles and do an unnecessary, extreme, risky operation for the cash. So he has a very he's got that doctor's just completely analytical mind. He's not going to be swayed by greed. He's not going to be swayed by Violet's theatrics and, trying to impress him with poetry or art or any of these things. He's not insulting her or rebuffing her, but he's not in any way falling for her crap.
Right. And it's Katharine Hepburn. She was a beautiful woman who's used to getting attention, and she's used to people falling over. And Katharine Hepburn is a gorgeous lady and just has so much charisma that I just can imagine what it's like to act in a scene with her.
Another very funny moment. Again, there's a lot of more humor here than I thought there was, where, again, she's trying to impress the doctor. She's always trying to impress the doctor with how cultured she and her son were. And nobody understood our love, and nobody could possibly come close to You have no idea. It was so beautiful. And he's trying to get to the truth. He's trying to very gently say, is it possible that your son, had a sex life that you maybe weren't aware of, or, maybe was outside of the role. He's being super respectful. And she says, I want you to understand, my son was chaste. And by chaste, I don't mean CHASED, although he was that. I mean CHASTE. And the doctor's like, yeah, I know what you meant.
I know what you meant. Elizabeth Taylor, Mercedes McCambridge, the scene with them is just amazing in the hospital. When she gets out of the room, and then there's two rooms. There's one for the men and the women at the hospital, and she's almost going to jump in there. The part where Elizabeth Taylor is brought back and then has to describe what actually happened. And so it's a mixture of her talking, and then the camera work is really interesting because it's like Elizabeth Taylor in profile, and then they have this background, and they have an actor, and Dr. Pop Culture sent me a tweet about the actor who played Sebastian. The whole imagery of Sebastian, and they're actually acting out what happened to him, being, torn apart by these people. It's this very over-the-top thing, and it's very over the top, what she's explaining, and it would be very easy to kind of laugh and roll your eyes because it's so...
That's very true. Yeah.
It's so ludicrous, really, frankly, but she swears this is what happened.
And then?
I ran. They let me run. They didn't even see me.
Run where?
Down. The waiters, police, people ran out of buildings back up to where Cousin Sebastian. He was lying naked on the broken stone. And this you won't believe. Nobody could believe it. It looked as if they had devoured him. As if they'd torn or cut parts of him away with their hands. Or with knives, or those jagged tin cans they made music with. As if they'd torn bits of him away and stuffed them into those gobbling mouths. There wasn't a sound anymore. There was nothing. But Sebastian, lying on those stones, torn and crushed.
It's Elizabeth Taylor in her white bathing suit, and Elizabeth Taylor acting. I mean, just
oh my gosh, that dress when he's running up the hill and he's going to be killed, and she's running after him, and she's in that dress with the headscarf, and the cinematographer, cinematographer is Jack Hildyard. He's British. He did Bridge on the River Kwai,
which we'll cover one day.
He did the Laurence Olivier version of Henry V. and Casino Royale, among other things.
Oh, interesting.
And it is beautifully done. I agree. The cinematography in this, even though like somehow when we're in Violet's house and garden, it feels very much like we're on a stage set. It feels very much like a sound stage. I'm not mad at it.
No,
I'm kind of okay about it because it gives it this feeling about this artificial world that she and Sebastian had constructed, and it seems like this kind of not reality that they lived in.
Also, it reflects
somehow.
that she's Violet is not living in truth. Violet is living in the past. Excuse me. Violet is not living with all of us. Violet, when she hears the story that Cathy says, when they're all there, Violet is like reacting, and then she basically screams and has this breakdown, and then assumes that the doctor is Sebastian. And she's kind of like, "Oh, hi, how are you? Let's go get some lunch." You know, she's just kind of, that's when he says, I think she was telling the truth. And we also should say that you and I both saw, there was a 1993 one version, and it was for BBC One, and it's with Maggie Smith and Rob Lowe.
Richard E. Grant is the brother.
Natasha Richardson. That's what I was thinking of.
Isn't she wonderful in this?
Oh, she's so good. Well,
I always forget she was so good.
R.I.P.
Right?
Yeah. They've done it. They've also done revivals on Broadway. I mean, it's a little dated. I mean, the whole thing is that
it's very over the top, Tennessee Williams. You know, it's like, again, it's a one-act play. It's like Tennessee Williams concentrate. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody is speaking in this very heightened way, very florid, lots of amazing Southern expressions are being thrown all over the place, and very big themes, lots of drama. It is dated. I agree. It has a datedness to it, but I still really enjoyed it.
Oh, it's wonderful. A lot of old movies are. I mean, it's just, I'm just saying now, like, how would you do it nowadays? Like, I don't know if the audience is, I don't know if the audience is there for that. Yeah. I think, but for the time, and it was funny to go back and read, for me to go back and read the original movie reviews, because they're New York City editors, like for Time Magazine and stuff. So they saw the play and they know what was in the play. And in the movie, they have to sanitize it a bit because they had to do that with all of Tennessee Williams' work. And they were like, they're actually talking about cannibalism. The review in the New York Times, like, they're talking about homosexuality and cannibalism. Can you believe that? And then people are like, whoa, wow, I got to see this. This is...
I know. Was it like John Wayne who was like, this is the most disgusting
Yes, he
film?
did.
And people were like, let's go.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Sign me up. It's great. It really holds up. It's interesting. It's very, like,
the performances.
The performances are wonderful.
So
between book and movie, I'm going to say the movie.
Oh, absolutely, the movie. I just love this movie. I could watch it over and over again. I like to watch it and then like just watch Mercedes McCambridge. Mm-hmm. Just watch the brother. That brother.
He's great.
Don't you just want to punch him?
Gary Raymond as George. He's really, really good. Yeah.
He's so stupid. You know, just, and all the knickknacks. All the, like, extremely homoerotic art.
Yes.
That Sebastian has in his private study. Like, yeesh.
How did she
Who
not
decorated
know?
this place? Johnny Versace and Truman Capote? What is this?
Yeah, I'm going to pick the movie. It did
so
really
much
well.
Fun.
I think Elizabeth Taylor won a Golden Globe. Yes, Elizabeth Taylor won the Golden
like
Globe.
An Obie.
There was an Obie, yeah, but it wasn't for Elizabeth Taylor. It was someone. Anne Meacham won an Obie.
Anne Meacham, yeah. It's great. Just watch it. You will not be disappointed.
Yeah.
You will not be disappointed. It is so good. These two women are so good. And then everybody else is just icing on the cake.
Yeah.
Love. Love, 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 love. Okay, let's talk about what we're doing next.
What we're doing next is a short story that I think every kid in America, I think, in junior high or high school had to read. It was Most Dangerous Game, 1932. It's streaming everywhere on Prime Video, on Max, YouTube. You can get it anywhere. It has Fay Wray, Joel McCrea. It's only an hour, and it has a very high rating. But that's what we're going to be covering next. As you can see, that we are looking for ideas. So if you have an idea, all those places I mentioned at the top of the show, you could reach out to us. We definitely recommend, if you are into Facebook at all, our Facebook group is probably the best place, but you can also go to those other places. Our email, once again, is bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. And Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all my social media callouts are at She's Nacho Mama. And where can they find you?
You can find me at brooklynfitchick.com. That's my site. That's where I am for Instagram and Threads. And then I'm at Brooklyn Margot for TikTok, where I have some of our clips there, and also for Twitter. All right, everybody, stay cool. We'll be back next week with The Most Dangerous Game. Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We're a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You could find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. You could find us on Twitter, Threads,